I spent the first part of the day reading and researching a bit about food storage, specifically canning, but also, freezer preparation. Um, Pickling, I do have an interest in pickling, but it's a little bit more precise. And I'm looking to get started a little bit into canning this year. Uh, this does have something to do with music. Trust me, bear with me for a little bit, I'll get to it. But where my mind has been going recently is, um, as it often does, it goes to food. Not only because I love to eat, I also love to cook, but I'm also very concerned with where my food comes from. This maybe wasn't always the case, but as I grow older and have more experience in the world, this is becoming more and more something that I'm trying to pay very close attention to. And current events are also adding to this. So some of the things that we've tried to implement here in my household, we are much more diligent about making meal plans, and often for a week, sometimes more at a time, and then whatever grocery needs we have at that time to go out and accomplish those things efficiently. It's actually been a really great thing just to help get our household in order quite a bit. We've also taken to gardening and have become much better at it. We've been gardening for the past few years. Each year, I think we get a little bit better at it, a little bit more efficient. And specifically, we're looking to grow things that we can, well, the foods that we use a lot, the fresh veg that we use regularly and we eat and consume regularly, but also foods that we can store, and that we can store through relatively accessible methods such as canning. You can store some of those things for a year and sometimes even more. And all of this is to take greater control over what we intake, as well as how to balance and manage our household in light of the number of food shortages that are taking place in and around our country, and specifically our local economies. This does vary from one municipality to the next, and here in the Los Angeles area, we feel that pinch in a couple of different areas. Certainly the price of eggs has gone up and is going to continue to go up. Meat and dairy, those prices are going to continue to go up. We are noticing a lot of our fresh produce, those prices are starting to increase. There are certain other products that we consume, although not a lot of them. Prices across the board are just going up, continually going up. And so the strategy is, what can we produce here in our own garden? And then, you need to apply some sort of cost benefit analysis to this and really try to ascertain, is this a benefit to be producing food in this manner? Or is it more expensive to grow at home? So you're factoring things in, like certainly the cost of the seeds. That's going to be relatively inexpensive, but for certain types of fruits and vegetables, that's an expense. I think more important than that is the soil. And our particular garden area was filled with a ton of sand. I think the previous occupants of this house had tried to turn the backyard into something of a play area, and they had dumped a ton of sand back there. We've spent hours digging sand out and pulling it out of our garden, and then we've had to replace that with more quality topsoil. Often we go out and buy bags of topsoil and transplant those over to the house, or we go pick up topsoil from other locations and bring it back. Of course, then there's the cost of whatever fertilizers that you're going to use, and fertilizer prices are also going to go up, and we really have not felt that quite yet. I think commercial farmers have felt it, but more consumer level farmers, hobby gardeners like myself, we haven't really felt that pressure yet, but it's coming. And then there's the cost of water, and the cost of water is going to continue to go up as well, for various different reasons, and especially here in the state of California, that's going to turn into a higher priced commodity as time goes on. But if you factor all these things in together, it's still going to be cheaper to do your own gardening on a piece-by-piece basis. And along with that, there's the satisfaction of knowing where exactly this produce is coming from. It's coming from your garden, harvested by your hands. So the biggest component, of course, is time. You know, the time that you spend cultivating and working, coaxing, if you will, for these veg elements to grow. This is where my mind has been going recently, is how can we, here in my household, how can we take and assert greater control over not only the foods that we produce here in the garden and consume, but then store for long-term use as well? How can we assert greater control over these things? Now, this is all analogous to music. 100% it's analogous to music. And I'm speaking, of course, from firsthand experience about this, but there's a lot of musicians that will attest to this as well, that all of the best musicians end up being really fantastic cooks. There's something about the timing, the composition. If you start to think of food, your recipes as composition, because what are we really talking about? We're really talking about changing states of matter, right? When you take onions and you start to cook them, you're changing their molecular composition. The cooking helps to release sugars, right? You're releasing water content, softening the veg. And I use onions as an example because I often cook a lot of sauces and other bases that have onion, ginger, and garlic in their base. I make a lot of North Indian curries from scratch, and that's kind of the base for all of it. Onion, ginger, garlic, you know, cheap root vegetables that you can grow in your own garden, and they happen to be food staples. It's kind of consistent all around the world, actually. If you look at different cuisine types, you'll find these ingredients are pretty consistent across the board. But isn't that what cooking is about? Is changing this state of matter, moving it from one form to another form, from a solid to a liquid, cooking off a specific amount of the liquid and reducing it down, intensifying the flavor around with it, right? It's wonderful, it's amazing, but there's technique to it. There's nuance to it, just the same that there is with musical composition and truthfully with improvisation. And I think this is where it's most analogous. The best improvisers that I know also happen to be pretty fantastic cooks. They have a sensibility of when to add a new element to it. For example, when to add salt. If you over salt vegetables, they weep, right? They start to release too much moisture and they get too soft. But what if that's exactly what you want? When you're cooking something, you add a touch of salt to that to help it let go of some of that water while you're trying to soften and change that composition a bit. It just seems to me that through experience, the best improvisers tend to develop this sense of how to time a meal. And my wife often laughs at me a little bit that I have this impeccable timing where I'm cooking one thing on the stovetop and another thing is coming in the oven, and then I'm going to heat up one more thing in the toaster oven, all getting ready to put the meal on the table, and all of these elements, the timer goes off simultaneously and they're all ready to go at once. You know, there's something about the timing of food preparation that music, there's a high degree of analogy there. Maybe that's one of the reasons that I like to cook as much as I do. It's creative. It's fun to open your refrigerator and look at what you have on hand and start making decisions and say, okay, this is how I'm going to cook and use these ingredients. That's fun to me. It's creative. It's investigative. How can I make something new from these ingredients that I have? Music is no different. But there's another analogy to this that I thought was more prescient, especially in modern times here, and that comes back to the idea of nourishment. We all know that food nourishes the body, nourishes the mind, nourishes the soul. I think the big three, they're easy: diet, sleep, and exercise. If you can get those three things integrated into your life in a healthy and holistic manner, you are setting the stage for a very high level of health and hopefully quality throughout your life. Okay? Food is meant to nourish, right? Garbage in, garbage out. Bringing in good food, nutritious food, tasty food. This is how we nourish mind, body, soul. Music is not too different from this. Now, on the surface, of course, music doesn't have a nutritional quality necessarily, but it has massive mental and emotional capacities to nourish the mind and nourish the spirit. Music absolutely has a very high capacity to accomplish this. But just like food, where you are sourcing your music, I think has weight. So much music that we experience now is completely devoid of meaning. And so many of the areas in your life where you experience music, it's there as a distraction, and more often than not to serve an advertising need. Using our food and music analogy here, let's look at the grocery store, for example. The grocery store where I shop, there's music running constantly over the PA. Constantly. As it would be at any department store. Not so much at the mall, but in individual stores at the mall, there's often music playing. And I guess there's some malls where they would have, music blasting over a PA or loudspeaker or something like that as people mill around. But then again, people are not really going to malls these days either. So, but at the grocery store, what I notice is the playlists that they're choosing, or the B list and the C list playlists. These are not the hits that you hear right now from your favorite artists. Sometimes they do play really high quality music, but from a bygone era. In my old neighborhood, sort of the local community grocery store, their playlist that they got was all early 80s new wave music. Some of that is stunning, not just in the composition, but in the production and the overall aesthetic for that music. I love that era of music. It's fantastic. So to walk into a grocery store and, be able to listen to Echo and the Bunnymen over the loudspeaker as you're, picking up your produce. What fun is that? Or to hear Simple Minds come on while you're shopping for milk or meats. That's fun. It's great. But nowadays, the grocery store where I shop, it's all B-list and C-list nonsense. You've never heard these songs before, and you'll probably never hear them again. These are songs that are specifically composed and produced exactly to be put on these types of playlists, to be sold in aggregate as a package to a corporation for them to pipe into their consumer subconscious. And, let's be frank, oftentimes they are putting subliminal messages into some of this content. I don't know to the depth that penetrates. I really don't know. I don't know how pervasive it is, but it's been acknowledged that this is a practice. That's where you're consuming music. When you turn on your cell phone and you go to YouTube, how many of people who are, content creators, no different from me, but they're, sync licensing other tracks that are available to their YouTube channel for whatever their creations are. Like if I go into the back end of my YouTube channel, it gives me a selection of music that I can just take and put into my own videos. That then YouTube would pay out a very, very, very infinitesimally small sync license payout for that usage. So you are getting mass produced, factory farmed, if you will, musical content that's being piped directly to you via your phone or your computer. There's very few listeners out there who are buying albums. You're not buying CDs. Some people are buying vinyl, which I think is pretty cool. I'd love to make a vinyl record. It's expensive to do, and there's anywhere from a 6 to 9 month waiting list right now. So the record that I have coming out here in another 6 weeks or so is not going to be a vinyl release. I am doing a very short run of CDs on it, but I digress. I'll come back to that subject on another day. But most of you are not getting albums. Most of you are not even listening to albums, even though you are getting Spotify. You have Spotify and you've got the capacity with a premium account, you could listen to an entire record. But Spotify wants to start making these decisions for you and say, don't listen to the whole record. Here's a playlist that we generated for you. We think you'll like it more. Here, listen to this. So you're being force-fed material. It's not necessarily the material that you would choose, but the algorithm is anticipating that you're going to have some sort of response to it. Is that an authentic response, or is it a conditioned one? Only you can really answer that for yourself. For me, I can't stand it. I can't stand it. I prefer to make my own decisions as far as what I want to listen to. I prefer to sit down and listen to a record in its entirety. And I'll set aside time, whether that's 45 to 60 minutes, to sit quietly and enjoy the artist's vision as they intended it. Now, that's not the same with every record, of course, but for the most part, the artists that I listen to, the music that I enjoy, they are thinking in terms of an album. Music nourishes. Music inspires. Some of the best ideas that I've ever had are as a result of listening or practicing music. I'm talking musical ideas or non-musical ideas, right? So where you're sourcing your music, I think, is actually very important. Similar to how you are sourcing your food, right? And under zero circumstances am I willing to yield control over that over to another entity who is going to be making that decision for me. That's a bad idea. It's my mind and my imagination. Why would I not massage that with the things where my mind and body naturally resonate? Because you do resonate with music in the same way that you resonate with food, and you find meaning within food. Food can be experiential, right? And that means going to someone's house and being served a meal that they've created. I mean, this was at one point the height of social interaction, and still is incredibly significant. To go to someone's home and sit down and enjoy a meal that they've created for you. Similarly, when you go to a concert and you sit down, you watch artists come out on stage and begin to create something. It's linear. It starts at the beginning, it has an end, and there's a series of wonderful events that happen in the midst of it. And it's there for you. So as time is going on, I'm much more interested in the how I source my food and where I source it, and similar how I source my food, where I source it from, what those outlets are. But I'm not saying who. I'm not creating music for a specific audience. It's not my intent. I'm attempting to make music for anyone who's going to take the time to listen. And if you do take the time to listen, thank you. You could agree with me, or you could disagree with me. I frankly don't care. But if you find some point in the music that you resonate with, that probably means that we can share that point in common. Sitting down And taking a meal, a good quality home cooked meal, is going to nourish you in a way that mass produced, carefully cultivated food is just simply not going to do for you. And by I mean careful cultivation, I'm talking about the production, the processing of food. You can get some instant gratification from things, right? We load our food up with additives, artificial sweeteners that at the beginning, sure, they tantalize and open the senses up, but after a few minutes of that, it's an unnatural food response. And it's actually damaging to the body. You'd be better off just having sugar instead of high fructose corn syrup. Case in point, there's a difference between drinking a can of Coke here in the United States versus one overseas. I don't drink soda, but when I travel and I go international, I do enjoy having like 1/2 a can or a glass of Coca-Cola that has real sugar in it. The difference is astronomical. Be careful where you're sourcing your music from. I mean, I could spend a lot of time, and perhaps I'll do another talk like this, talking about the pitfalls of the digital music market and how damaging that is for the artist. With the exception of a select few number of artists, the rest of us who are independent, it's not a good marketplace for us to exist. That's why there's a constant appeal from people like me to people like you to engage us via our albums that we sell on our own website. Now, my new record coming out, yeah, it's going to be on Spotify. It's on Apple Music. There's video content on YouTube. You're watching me on YouTube right now. But if you really have an interest of interacting with the music and finding where does this music come from and what does it actually have to offer you, go find my record. Go to my website and take it directly from there. You're helping yourself and you're helping me. When you help me, it enables me to continue to do this. I can keep bringing high quality music. Generally, it's music that I make right here, just the same as when you would come to take a meal at my table. So much of that food is going to come from my garden, or at least from another local garden. So we know where the source is. Choose wisely.